Welcome back. I'm going to be doing a propagation video, and we're going to be using this sphagnum moss, which I'll just be calling moss from here on out. It's just easier to say. Here's the brand. You can use any brand. Just make sure it's that kind of moss. And you're going to need a Ziploc bag. This is to cover the cuttings with, and a pot with a drain hole. Just make some space here. And later on, I'll show you these mulberry cuttings. So just some tools that we need: a knife, clipper. Step one is we're gonna moisten the moss. Sorry if the word moist triggers you guys. I'll be saying moist a lot as well. All right, so I think this is a good amount. I'm using filtered water here, not necessary. And I'm blocking the hole under the pot for now. It's just so the water doesn't drain away. Later on, when the water is absorbed, we're going to squeeze some of it out. So don't worry if you overfill your container. And it will shrink when it's sopping wet. So might have to add a little bit later. That's okay. Here I'm just squeezing and deterring any big pieces. You can get smaller moss. I just bought whatever was available. I got this moss at Home Depot. You can also order it online. I've seen it on Amazon. Just make sure it's not the potting soil moss that's like shredded to bits. That won't work. It's too wet. This is pretty sterile and it's a little acidic, which prevents mold and bacteria from growing and possibly killing your cuttings before they root. So I'm just making sure it's evenly moist at this point, and I'm going to squeeze out any excess. Here I'm thinking I'm going to go up a little bit more on the level here, so I'm just going to add just a little more of the moss. It's pressing down a bit. And yeah, we're going to repeat the process. I put my finger at the drain hole so the water doesn't come out. Drainage is important here. I did propagate a fig cutting in a jar. I showed you that. But since the water doesn't drain, there's a possibility that it might suffocate the roots. So just use a container with a drain hole. All right, so you get the idea. Try to moisten everything evenly while squeezing out the excess and tearing any big pieces, like I showed you before. Here I'm just squeezing the excess moisture. There's quite a lot of water. We want this kind of moss instead of the peat moss because this will prevent the suffocating the roots, because it's pretty airy. As you can see, like I fluffed it up here a bit. It's already at the level we want. Don't let any of this go down your sink. Just put the excess in here. Make sure your sink is clean before you do this. If not, just throw the excess out, just giving it a rinse. And plop it back in here. Like I said, make sure you're using a drain plug if you're doing this inside. If it's not too cold, recommend you this outside. Just clean our hands before we get into the next step. The next step is going to be cutting our tie-try down to size. I'm going to do about 6 inches. I'm going to also clip off the thorns. And as far as the leaves go, once these are cut to size, we'll determine which leaves are going to remain. Usually I leave 1 or 2 leaves at the top because I am going to propagate these inside my grow tent, which has lighting. So if we leave a leaf on, it'll help feed the cutting as it roots itself into the moss. You don't want too many leaves because the leaves will transpirate water and your cutting will dry out. So a leaf or 2 is okay. Just cutting the remainder to size. And I am babysitting a cat here who just jumped on the counter. She's not allowed on the counter, but she's a cat, doesn't care. So the counter is no longer a sterile environment. Just kidding. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward the video here. Ta-da! Okay, so we cut off the thorns and we scored the bottoms of the cuttings. And we left 1 or 2 leaves at the top. And here we're just checking our moss again for moisture. So it did absorb a lot of water, so I'm just going to squeeze a little bit more out. You don't want this to be sopping wet because then it becomes anaerobic, which means there is no oxygen in between the spaces here, which will lead to rot. We don't want your cuttings to rot. So not a big deal. I'm just squeezing the excess moisture right back out, and we're going to pop it back in the pot once it's sufficiently moist. Okay, so just checking it again. I'm happy with the saturation level on these. There's a better word, right? And just making sure it stays fluffy when I'm putting it back into the pot, just to maintain some air pockets. There's a couple other ways to propagate cuttings. You can also do them in water with a bubbler. I haven't tried that yet. That's more like an aeroponics situation, which I haven't dabbled in yet personally, but maybe sometime in the future. People also propagate cuttings with a mister. So they'll be in some kind of medium like rock wool or something similar. And there'll be a mister that sprays the cuttings with water on a timer. I don't know the exact specifics of it, which kind of skips the step of needing to bag them, which I'm going to show you later. And here, yeah, I'm just cleaning up a little bit. So this is where the sink plug comes in handy, so the moss doesn't go down the drain and potentially clog your pipes. And here I opened up the baggie with the mulberry cuttings. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to score the bottom of the mulberries. And we're going to share this pot. We're going to stick the Thai tries in here with the mulberries. And since I didn't get a good shot of me scoring the citrus, I'm doing it here with the mulberry. So just score the bottom. Don't have to go too crazy with it. Just want to expose some of the cambium on either side. One side is okay. I like to do both sides. And there you have it. So do that to the remainder of your cuttings. And then these little pieces here, I'm going to actually graft them to my cuttings from the mulberry that I found outside. So they should be compatible according to my research. So just put them in a little bit further than where you scored, just so that they're getting contact with the moss. And we're going to make sure the gaps are closed on the top, right? We don't want these to dry out. The sphagnum moss has enough water, so once the cuttings begin to send out roots, they'll go deeper down into the pot and begin to take up more of the water in here. So how long does this take? Well, it might take a month at least, if not more. I'm not going to use bottom heat, but if you have a heat mat, it should help. I'm just going to stick these in my grow tent, which is basically room temperature when the lights are off. When the lights are on, it could get up to maybe 80s in there. We're going to put a Ziploc bag over this and seal it. So we shouldn't have to water it, but we can take a look every week or so to make sure the moss is not drying out too quickly. The bag should keep the moisture in, so most likely there won't be any need for additional watering. But just keep an eye on it. You can tell the water is evaporating once you pick up your pot and it feels lighter than when it was watered. So you can always just water again, take the bag off, water again. You can also give it a misting with a spray bottle if it looks like your leaves are looking dry. Here I felt like the pot was a little bit on the light side, so I'm just adding a little bit more water. It's on the low setting there. And we're going to let it drain for a second. Make sure your cuttings are deep enough and press any of the gaps, like I mentioned earlier. So yeah, the gaps here look good, and I'm happy with this. The leaves were pretty dry from being inside the greenhouse, so just give it a little bit of a moistening with my fingers there. And all right, we're gonna slip the bag over. I brought that rubber band in case we needed to fix the bag better on the pot, but I don't think I'm gonna use it. So we can either slip it over this way. If the cuttings were shorter, you could just stick the whole pot in the bag, but I think it's easier to just slip the bag on or off this way versus digging the pot out of the bag. And I like to use a Ziploc bag because you can slide it closed at the appropriate width. But yeah, here we go. Thought about using the rubber band here, but it's not necessary. Just make sure the zipper is sufficiently closed. And there you have it. We're going to stick this in my grow tent. And I'll make an update video once I see anything happening. When tiny leaves start growing out, that's a good sign. Here is Naughty Kitty being scolded for climbing on the counter, but she wanted to look out the window, so we can't be too mad. And here I'm getting scolded back. I did graft the mulberry onto this clump of rooted cuttings. Did it off camera because I needed to be a little more precise since they're small. And I'll update when this takes. I think we have a good chance of these taking. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.